There we go. Thank you for joining the webinar, everybody. Just have a few technical hits at this end, but it did give chance for a few more people to join, so that is all good. Hope everyone's doing well. We've got a fairly international crowd, so wherever you are joining us from, I hope all is well and you're keeping good. So yes, my name's Al Simmons, and I'm part of the sales team here at Teamwork Digital in London. We are the longest standing phase one partner in the UK, amongst other brands for professional and non-professional photography in and out of the studio. But yeah, today we're going to be focusing on the phase one XF in particular, and the IQ4 system. Which has been a development of the phase one system that we've had for the last going on a couple of years. So we're going to be joined by Drew Altdoerffer, who's very much at the heart of the XF and IQ4 system, and he's going to be running through all the elements of that system with us, and all of the developments that have come with the IQ4, and the way that it's continuing to push the envelope when it comes to digital studio medium format photography. We've got my colleague Steve Martin and Eric Joachim from Phase One, who are going to be propping up the proverbial bar in the chat section, so you can aim any questions that you might have towards them. And this is going to be focused on Q&A. You know, we're going to lay some foundations on the XF and IQ4 system, but we really do want to address your questions, thoughts, and feedback for the most part with the session. So if you head on over to the chat section in the top right-hand corner, you can add any questions into there, and Steve and Eric will be flagging those for me and Drew to come back to at the end. You'll also find in there's a poll section, which has just got a few basic polls. So if you've got 2 minutes while you're in the session and you want to fill in those polls, it's useful for us at the back end to see. See where people are coming from, what systems people are using, and the audience they're attending. So thanks again for joining. If you have ever joined any phase one webinars, chances are you may have met him before. Drew Altdoerffer has been at phase one for a number of years now, background initially in the technical support side, but over the years he's kind of become much more of a integral part of the phase one machine, particularly when it comes to the XF, XT and IQ4 systems. So he's a great knowledge on all things phase one, and we're lucky to have him today. So as I say, any questions, thoughts, feedback, we can fire them straight at Drew, and he'll be able to enlighten us on all things XF IQ4. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Drew into the room and we can kick off. There we go.
Hey, I'm here.
Hello, Drew. Joining us from wintry Copenhagen, Denmark. Thanks for joining, Drew.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
Good. I hope you're well.
I am. And yourself?
All good. All good. It's cold here in London.
I need a setup like you. You're sitting down. That looks comfortable.
Yeah, it's good. We like to do these things from a comfortable position. Yeah, it's good.
We have Danish health and safety. I have to stand up every 15 minutes. Stretches. So I'm getting.
Yeah, but that's good. No, that's good. It's nice to see you. So yeah, I think we should kick straight off. Okay. I think the best place to start, really. I mean, we're going to come on to the IQ4 system and where that's developed in the relatively short space of time it's been with us. But I think the best place to start is with the XF itself, because I mean, it never ceases to surprise me that even 5 going on 6 years after its release, we're still doing sessions on the XF as a new and current camera because of the way that it's been designed to develop. So and I think that's testament to your work and the work of Phase One itself, that you've created a system that is still as current as it was in 2015 or whenever it was that it was released. Yeah. What's your background on the XF and where we are today with it?
Well, we're in a good place today, a better place than we were before. The XF, as you mentioned, it was released in 2015. And the fact that we are still talking about it, I think, is a testament to the fact that we did a good job designing it and implementing it. We really over-engineered the XF, and that's not a simplification. You know, when we were designing this thing, and it took a while, 2013, 2014, before its launch in 2015, we were really looking at, you know, this camera system is going to be around for a decade plus. So what is it that this might need? And there's a lot of guesswork involved in that, which direction the industry is going to go. But what is it that it will absolutely need, and what is it that it will need to have over and over again? You know, what is it it's going to need to have improved? So the XF now, we are on feature update number 8 for the XF, where we've taken it from 2015 to now 2021. Improving really everything and anything that is requested from our customers, and anything and everything that will get us into new market segments and reach new professional studio photographers. So that's where we are. We're in a very good spot in a very long legacy of this camera system.
And for people that don't know, I suppose unique and interesting thing is that all of those updates, for the most part, other than one hardware update, they've all been through firmware.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we when I say we over-engineered it, we over-engineered quite a few parts of it in terms of the hardware, so that it's robust. But then there's also, you know, the firmware aspect of it. We put a lot more memory and a lot more RAM into this very simple camera system, knowing that we were going to be able to reprogram it, redesign it, implement new functions, new features as new technology came along. You know, once we have new lenses and new components that can fit in with the camera, then we have new opportunities to expand kind of what it can do, what it will do. So most of that has been firmware, but yep, there's been a few pieces of hardware that we've improved steadily over time.
So yeah, I mean that again, for people that don't know, the hardware upgrade that was a couple of years ago is on the autofocus system itself. So, you know, it's not just a camera that's fixed in what it can do and how it can function. You know, you've very much designed it so that it can be improved on, I suppose, as technical developments happen.
There's really one. This is the only camera system that I'm aware of. It's my job to be aware of most camera systems, but it's the only one that I'm aware of that's designed with kind of an interchangeable autofocus on the actual hardware side. So when we designed and implemented it, the autofocus module is a modular system, so we can take it out and put in a new one. And we did that knowing that going forward we would have better sensors, higher resolution, and we would need to rely on the autofocus to not only be more precise, but of course do different aspects that the camera always had. So autofocus sensors used to, you know, just be very simple sensors with prisms that split it, and we just put, you know, basically a cell phone camera sensor in there, so that we could just replace that and replace the components around it and the RAM and the engine that drives it. And that's where we went from HAP1, which was the original autofocus, to HAP2, HAP2. So that's the Honeybee autofocus platform, is what we call it, because we like to have fun.
And again, I mean, I suppose to give some background, so the XF really was the first system that you as Phase One have really designed and developed from the ground up.
Yeah.
And I suppose to look at the system as a whole, you know, how does that impact, you know, what you're working with in terms of the digital back technology you've got, and then also your lens design as well? Because, you know, the lenses are very much kind of also part of the, very much a part of the system.
Sure. Yeah. So this being the first system that we did entirely, prior to the XF camera system, we were really just focusing on the digital backs, coming from an H platform to a P plus, and then to the IQ. So the digital backs is, you know, our area of speciality. But the camera bodies we relied on, Hasselblad, Contax, Mamiya, Hasselblad V, Hasselblad H. So those camera bodies were ones that we were happy to interface with, build these digital backs that could interface with all these camera systems. But, you know, as time went on, some of those camera systems, the health of those companies started to come into question. Contax being the one that I think everybody who's here might remember fondly, but it's no longer around.
Much beloved.
Exactly. So, we looked at all these camera systems that we interface with and which ones, what are the good, what are the bad, what are the trade-offs of each individual one. And we tried to really combine all the key aspects into the XF. That's when we partnered up with Mamiya and eventually bought Mamiya in Japan because we built off of their platform. So the bones of the XF would be Mamiya AF, and then the AFD, and then the DF, and the DF Plus, and then the XF. So that's really the bones of it. But the only thing that's really left of that that Mamiya legacy is the bayonet mount for the lens. Everything else is all brand new, even down to the shutters, which are all, of course, updated and modified from those good old days. So
sorry, go on.
Just building that system, designing that camera system, it takes a long time, and it's a big project. But we always did it with a kind of a different insight into how we were going to build and expand and evolve that camera system, because we came from this world. So with these digital backs, we knew what we were going to do with this platform going forward. This was 2013 and 14 is when we were putting the final touches on the plan for this. And then in 15, we came out with the IQ3 range, and that went from, it started at a 60 megapixel and went up to 100. And then, of course, we had the new platform, the IQ4s, that we knew was going to be down the road with 151 megapixels, and who knows what the future holds. But we have this insight into, what we're going to be building on the digital back side of things, what technology we can put into those digital backs, which are essentially just computers with sensors on there. And then that helps us, really figure out, well, where can we take the XF and how can we expand on it? And what are the limitations we're going to be up against that we need to plan for now as this grows and evolves?
And I suppose in the last year and a half since we've had the Phase 1 XT release, the XF has kind of become much more of a, the way that you've kind of, I suppose, marketed and positioned the XT and the XF, you've now very much got a dedicated landscape, an architecture system, and a studio platform. And I suppose from your point of view and your dealings with the end users themselves, who is the XF really going to benefit? Who are you designing those features for now and looking to work with?
And I think we have three priorities at Phase 1. It's image quality, and image quality. Then after that, we need to find some vehicles to put our image quality into. So the XF from 2015 until 2019 was really our only dedicated camera system. We, of course, worked with other people. Even you could buy an IQ3 for your Hasselblad H if you wanted to. We really embodied that open platform kind of concept. But we want to make sure that we can build the right camera system for the right customer and not try and force everyone to use one camera system. So the XF is built, designed, implemented for professional uses, right? It's got a 5-year warranty. It's certainly not light and small. This is built like a tank, and it's built like a tank because that's a professional needs those tools to last and to be reliable, dependable. But it's, of course, not the best solution for someone that's going to be out in the field as a landscape photographer. Now, there are fantastic camera systems out there for landscape photographers, but we, over the years, again and again and again, just found people that were taking this XF out into the field, which is perfectly fine. I'm not going to stop anybody from doing that, but it's not the perfect solution for that kind of application. So there were other camera systems that we had worked with, being an open platform company. Alpa, Arca, Cambo. So we had worked with them to implement our IQ4 technology into their mechanical analog camera systems. But of course, that same market that kept taking this XF out into the field, these are most times professionals, sometimes not, but they have a very unique set of requirements. They're out there to take 2 or 3 captures. That's it, right? They're going to spend a whole day or a whole week to take maybe 20 shots, and they're going to be traveling. So having things that are small and light. If you're only going to take a dozen shots or whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're really sparing no expense when it comes down to the image quality, the lenses, the control.
Sure.
So just approaching that market with the XT was I wouldn't say a simple task. It was a fun task, but what we wanted to do is just make the very specific tool for that application. So the XF, when it comes down to professionals and of course studio use, but you can put this thing anywhere you want, and no one's going to tell you no, and the camera will of course perform wherever it is you need it to go. But the XT then became, if there's these landscape photographers, architectural photographers, people that are out in the elements that are really going to be lining up their shot and taking that one capture. Well, how can we really make the perfect dedicated system for them? Keeping in mind we have image quality, and image quality is the top 3 priorities. What's priority 4, 5, and 6? Well, size and weight, but then of course integration and simplicity and robustness, and then just ease of use design elements like the rotation of the XT. So taking that platform that's in the IQ4 and kind of being able to move it into a different camera system for a different specified purpose is it's fantastic. And it really just feeds off of the concept of we invest, we build one system, and then look at all the ways that we can grow it, expand it, diversify it.
Yeah, and you hinted a little while back about the, obviously there's the potential for higher resolution and newer digital backs to be released, but obviously that's not what we're going to, try and get out of you today. But from your perspective, and also, we hear a lot, there's this often heard position, which is, at some point, do you need more resolution? And, we'll see what happens in the future. But with the release of the 80mm Mark II at the end of last year, where are we now? Is it maybe more now that we're in a place where actually there are a few other elements of that system that, let's focus on those to upgrade rather than, immediately go for, right, let's go for more resolution? Are we now at a position where actually it's, let's work on those lenses and make those even better?
Well, I think everything is, when it's a system, right? If it's a camera, if all we did is make cameras, right, we would have, camera number 1, and then after 18 months, we would offer you camera number 2, and then camera number 3. This would just be a very linear growth, like it is with every camera company. If Sony comes out with the A7R4, well, you better bet that there's going to be an A7R5 and an A7R6, or however that's going to work. But there's always just a very clean lineage of the generations of cameras. When you have a system that's a camera body, a lens, and a digital back, or 2 camera bodies, 2 different types of lenses, and then 1 core digital back, we don't have this very linear succession. What we do have is all of these products working in parallel, where one will jump forward, and then the other 2 will kind of match up to meet it, and then that one will jump forward, and then so you mentioned the lenses. Yes, we just came out with an 80mm Mark II. The old 80mm, which is still a fantastic lens, it was upgraded to the blue ring lens line for the 100 megapixel. So that was our target back then, was okay, we're coming out with a 80 megapixel or 100 megapixel sensor. We have this 80mm that's designed on this old optical design for film. What do we need to do to improve that so that it's good for 150, 200 megapixels? So that's when the blue ring lens line kind of was born, where we have, and I won't tell you what the exact target is, but we can say it's well above 200 megapixels. These lenses are built to design beyond what anything we have today or anything we're going to have tomorrow. The 80mm was right on that threshold. So with the 150, then we said, yeah, it's fine for the 150 because it can do up to 200, but you know what, it's going to need a little bit of a refresh. So we worked on having a Mark II of that 80mm. So the Mark II is just it doesn't replace the current 80, because the current 80 for the current products is fine, but we're just padding ourselves for the future. That 80mm Mark II and that Mark II concept allows us to put in new technology, put in new features, so that when we upgrade the XF body again, or we upgrade the digital backs again, now all of a sudden we can tap into new things in the lenses. So, it's not to say that we just have one thing that replaces the other. We constantly have this really, this web of different components that we're changing and upgrading so that we can successively match and pair it with different components. All of those depend on what the market actually needs, what the professional market needs.
Yeah.
That was a very long,
Well, I mean,
rambling way of answering you.
No, it was good. I mean, you I mean, you said about, the three priorities being image quality cubed, and I think that's I mean, it's one of the, again, the very unique things about phase one. It's like, even if it's a small redesign with 150 megapixels, that's hugely significant, even if it's a small
even if
kind of evaluation.
The exact same focal length of lens. This is a 150, which we added into our portfolio when we already had a 150. This one is a 2.8. Yeah. The previous one was a 3.5. Not a huge gain in terms of a stop, in terms of speed. Yes.
But optically, chalk and cheese.
There's bokeh improvements when you go from 3.5 to 2.8 if you're using it. But just overall, this lens is, chalk and cheese, as you say. Sure, I'm not going to talk down about the 150. It's one of my children. I love it. But image quality, and image quality being our priorities, do you think we really gave a lot of credence to the fact that this thing was going to be huge?
You didn't hold back.
No, when the optical designers say, it's going to be as big as a child's head, we say, okay, but I mean, that's
how big it has to be.
Big it has to be. So we don't make compromises. We don't cut corners. And again, if we think that, okay, this is for the photographer that's going to be in the studio and not climbing a mountain, well, all of a sudden, these two things seem acceptable. Okay, this is a big camera, this is a big lens, but that's perfectly fine. If somebody's going to be climbing a mountain, well, then we can move into something a bit smaller, a bit more compact.
Yeah. So maybe to answer that, phase one is the photographer who has no compromise.
Without a doubt. If we were going to compromise anything, it would be the size and weight. I think a lot of people would be okay with us doing that, but if it's going to affect image quality, we're not going to do it.
Yeah. So if we turn our attention to the IQ4, talk to me about how that kind of extended that feature updatable philosophy of the XF.
Yeah. So just like we had the Schneider-Kreuznach, well, if we look at our lens lineage, we had phase one lenses, which were just a redesign and repackage of the Mamiya lenses. They work on the XF. They worked on the previous DF Plus. Then we had the Schneider-Kreuznach lenses, which were leaf shutter lenses that Schneider-Kreuznach designed for us, and they met a higher quality requirement that we needed. So we had those lenses. I couldn't give you the timeline on those. I don't remember. Eric can, if somebody wants to ask the question.
Someone ask Eric in the chat.
But then, of course, we were coming out with both the XF. At the same time, we were coming out with a new digital platform, the IQ3. And we knew that we were going to need some improvement on some of the lenses. So that's where we came out with the Blue Ring lens line, which then takes, sometimes it's the same optical design, sometimes it's a new refreshed optical design, but the tolerances are much, much tighter so that we can, resolve beyond 200 megs. So that progression, right, where we have the lenses kind of doing this thing to meet up with the IQ3 and the XF that's coming out, then we have the IQ4. The IQ4 came out in 2018. The last IQ3 was released in 2017. So we had like a 3-year or a 1-year legacy of that IQ3, IQ3 100, IQ3 100 trichromatic, and then we came out with the IQ4. The IQ4 really took a step in the same direction that we did with the XF, where we over-engineered this thing to the nth degree. So we knew, like the XF, that we're going to invest all this time and money in a new platform. Well, that platform needs to last us a very long time. The IQ platform started in 2011 and brought us all the way up to 2017. So we had a nice 6-year run with that platform, and that had 40 megapixels, 60 megapixel, 80 megapixel, 100 megapixels. Now we have the IQ4 that we introduced, and it looks the same as the IQ3, but under the hood, it's completely new, completely different. And so this platform, again, has to be something that's going to last us a very long time. The previous one lasted us 6. I can tell you that this one's going to last quite a bit longer than 6. But this platform, over-engineered, really adopting new sensor technology, new ways to work with the actual image, with the programmable FPGAs, more RAM, more storage, so that we can really treat this like a computer. And we can, install different operating systems and install different features and install different A to D conversions. So we can take the image and convert it into something else and really push what it is we want to get out of the digital back. And there's two qualities of the digital back that are kind of, we need to squeeze the most out of them, right? That's the actual sensor, and then it's the actual processor. So those are the two components that we really need, whatever we can get our hands on that'll fit in this platform. So what has the most power? Well, at the time, it's a 151 megapixel sensor, backside illuminated CMOS sensor. So yes, we'll have that, no questions asked. We aren't after the resolution with that. Resolution's fantastic to have, but we're after how good the quality of the sensor is and what we can do with all that information. And then
I think that's quite important, right? It's not just about the pixel count.
Yeah, and the pixel count, if in the early 2000s, it was a race that once we hit 24 megapixels, it started to slow down, and everybody thought, that's good enough. I've got my Canon 5D Mark II. I don't need another camera for at least 5 years. Well, that didn't hold true. We just kept chipping away at this and moving forward. And eventually it's going to get to a point where, does resolution matter? Probably not, only because nobody would dare have a camera that's less than, let's say, 100 megapixels. Let's say that's our future. 100 megapixels is great. It's fantastic. But if there's a system out there that gives you 151 or 200 or 300 or 400, of course you can adopt that, not because you need that resolution and you need that scale. You're not going to be making prints that the viewing distance is 2 centimeters and they're the size of a wall. That's not the application, but it's all the things you can do with that information to actually build a small file, right? That small file that you build could be for a magazine. You don't need 151 megapixels of resolution for a magazine. However, with all that information, what can the software do? What can the digital back do? What can the post-processing do to give you different, unique results? You can improve your image performance to counteract noise at higher ISOs. If I have a 151 megapixel image, but I only need a 10 megapixel image, well, I can shoot at ISO 10,000 and then downsample and reduce the noise in the downsampling, so I have a beautiful, clean 10 megapixel file. That's something that the resolution on face value, I don't need the resolution, but that benefit is something that I can actually get from higher resolution when I downsample in software. So benefits like that are really important to think about when we think about how to expand the system and what we can do with it in the future. It's not about how big can somebody print this, although that's awesome. It's more about what can we do in the post-processing with that data, with that information. And then the other part is the actual processor that's in here. I saw on your poll that there are quite a few phase 1 owners that are tuning in right now, and that's fantastic. The remaining ones, you'll be an owner soon, I'm sure of it. But the phase 1 owners can probably attest that this digital back, if they use the IQ4, it works. I mean, it gets hot, like a computer does, like my computer's doing right now, broadcasting this webinar. The fan's spinning and it's warming up. This digital back will do the same thing because the processor in here, the RAM in here, the power that
it's pretty immense.
It's significant. And it's significant because we're doing things like frame averaging, taking a 151 megapixel image and taking it over and over and over again 1,000 times, and then combining it into a single 151 megapixel file. Or dual exposure plus, where this can take 2 shots almost at the same time and stitch them together so that it's one seamless image with 18 stops of dynamic range. So it's not about, what is the sensor, what is the resolution? It's what can I do with that data? What can I do with the quality of that data? What can I do with the processor in here, the computer in here, to turn that data into something else that I need? Dynamic range is really the staple of the quality of a sensor. How much dynamic range does it have? That will typically tell you how good of a sensor it is. So to have a system where you can actually modify dynamic range through these, computer-aided efforts is huge. That's how we can push photography forward. That's how we can really, get image quality, and image quality to 11. Tune them up from 10.
Yeah, I was having a conversation with someone recently, and that came up. It's like, and again, going back to that resolution race idea. The way that you seem to have been focusing the recent updates is actually, let's look at the other element of real image quality, which is the dynamic range, and it's cool to see you focus on that, like how can we push that? And yeah, we've reached a point where, this sensor in terms of resolution is phenomenal. How can we improve that even further by looking more at dynamic range and what we can do on that front?
And I mean, my camera bag right now, yes, I have one of these camera systems that gets bounced around in my bag on a daily basis. I'm fortunate enough to have that, but it's also got, a Sony that's in there. And that Sony, it's 42 megs of resolution, and it's perfect for like 90% of what I need. And I love that camera. And it gets the crap beat out of it, and it goes with me everywhere. But that extra 10%, where if it's a landscape shot or, whatever it is where I actually need a camera like this to do it justice, that's what that resolution is for. That's what that technology and that camera system is for. So the resolution race, as far as I'm concerned, is dead, because who cares? What are you doing with that resolution? That's the important part. And if you have, a camera system with 24 megs of resolution, I'm sure you're doing great photography with it. But, it's only going to get you so far in terms of all the other benefits. You might never need to print something that's the size of a wall, but if you do, you need the resolution. But there's other benefits that exist with that resolution that are so important to consider. And that's what we try to do with all these feature updates, because, to tell somebody that, it's you should buy phase 1 because it's 151 megs of resolution. I mean, we're better than that. Come on. That's not the maybe it gets your foot in the door, but that's not what drives us home.
Yeah, it's a bonus.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It's a bonus. If I did want to print all the time wall size photographs, and there's definitely professionals that's their core business. Paul Reefer, who he's one of our ambassadors, and he prints. I mean, that's what he does. So of course he needs the resolution to print large, but it's not everybody. Studio photographers shooting fashion for magazines. Come on. But there's so many other things they can do with the system.
Yeah. And then one thing I wanted to hear from you. So you've mentioned frame averaging and dual exposure, which if people don't know, are making use of the electronic shutter, which was introduced with the IQ3 which has become a core part of the IQ4. Other than for uses in the landscape, do you see a wider studio application for frame averaging, dual exposure? I mean,
there's been a lot of car photographers that we've worked with for frame averaging. Where if they're switching over to hot lights and they just want to paint the light on the car, then you've got a camera system. You don't need to do one long exposure and then wait for one long black calibration, only to find out that wasn't that good. Or you don't need to set the camera up and say, I'll try for 2 minutes, and then you run around the car for 2 minutes and think, oh nope, I did too much. With frame averaging, you can set the camera up in the studio. You can get your ambient fill light just really, really low, just so you need it. Then you can just turn on frame averaging for, an hour. Who cares? And then you can just run around the car and paint it here and there and do what you need to do. Go back, stop, and save it. So maybe you turned it on for an hour and it only took you 5 minutes. Well, you go back, you hit stop and save. Within 2 seconds, your image is up, and you can see, how did that work, and what do I need to do, and how should I slow down the individual frame rate or speed it up. So I think that's one professional studio application that has really benefited from frame averaging, and we've gotten a lot of good feedback from people. But more surprising to me, Jemmy Benedict is another one of our ambassadors. And her fine art photography is so painterly, right? So just there's a plasticity to it. It's just beautiful. Like you could step inside of it. But she uses strobes. She uses ProPhoto strobes, which with frame averaging, not the best. But if you're going to do a stitch of a background, right? You're going to do a plate of your background with some ambient light. We can do that with frame averaging and move the lights around and just really get that painterly effect on just the background. And then take another frame
and then take your image with your flash
in Photoshop and knock it together. So, there's definitely studio applications, professional applications for frame averaging we thought, of course this will be neat, but will it be a gimmick or will it be something that'll be an asset for a professional? And as it turns out, I'm happy to say, I mean, these are assets. So that's great.
That's good. To see. Yeah, cool. And also, I mean, as I said at the beginning, feedback from you, the audience, is very useful from this point of view. So it would be good to hear any from people who've either taken ownership of an IQ4 or who have used one, of kind of how that could develop and the applications that you might have used it for would be great. Let's look at the tethering and the storage of the IQ4, because that's been a key change from where we came from in the world of IQ1, 2s, and 3s with FireWire and USB 3. What's available in the IQ4 in terms of the working photographer and how they're tethering in the studio?
Right. So tethering is it's a difficult thing to plan for when you're designing a new product. A new product's going to take a year or two to really come to market. So you're investing in all this technology, and you kind of got to figure out, all right, well, where is this going to go? So what we used to have is just FireWire 400. And that really only existed because there weren't any other options, right? The world went from SCSI and USB 1 to FireWire. And FireWire was, 400 megs a second. So it had the bandwidth that we needed. So we adopted that. FireWire 400 ran its course. FireWire 800 came around, but FireWire 800 had a limited span where it was around with USB 3. So on the IQ platform, we adopted both of those. FireWire 800 and the USB 3, knowing that USB we can build off of. FireWire is probably going to slow down in terms of its adoption, but USB, it's universal. So we can build off of that. So we were able to, through updates and everything, stay current with USB 3 and that specific fitting. Then we were designing the IQ4. And designing the IQ4, we really had to think, there's some obvious things, right, when we were designing this, like Wi-Fi. Everything is Wi-Fi now. I can stream a television show to my TV. So obviously Wi-Fi is something that we need, and it's something that we need to build so that it can be updated and changed and remain robust. We're talking about huge data packets here, so maybe it's not going to be practical, but we need it to be there. So USB, check. Then, Wi-Fi, check. Then the USB 3 gets replaced by USB-C, and it's really just because Apple and Dell both had those in their pipeline for complete adoption. That we're confident that USB-C is going to stick around, so we put that in there. Then there's this bridge in between where we have the network communication over Wi-Fi. We have USB-C, so the thing in the middle that is already the standard for every communication. It's incredibly simple. It's easy to update and change, and it's also, just rock solid, is Ethernet.
It's very powerful.
Yeah. So we went back to Ethernet. It's something that we played around with in the early 2000s, but we ended up going back to it because every infrastructure is based on Cat 7. So now the IQ4 has USB-C, it has straight Ethernet jack, and then it has Wi-Fi. All three of those kind of give us the opportunity to play with different scenarios. USB-C is the fastest. You'll never hit the buffer when you're shooting with USB-C. It'll just dump everything onto your computer. Ethernet is a little bit slower, but it can also supply you power, and you can have a cable that's a mile long. And then Wi-Fi is Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is it's something that will constantly be improving and keeping it up to date with the demands, the workflow demands of photographers. But it's Wi-Fi. It's simple. You broadcast a network, connect to it, control it from your computer, take a shot. It comes over the airwaves and into your computer.
So just to jump in on that point, obviously through a few conversations with you before, you'll never give anything away in terms of what you're working on, which is understandable. Right. But how much would you say, the dream end position for the IQ4 is for it to be a completely wireless device?
Yeah, I think there's no way to answer what the end position for the IQ4 is because the end isn't in sight. We're going to keep plugging away at this thing for many, many years to come. But of course, Wi-Fi needs to become a much more practical part of the interfacing with the IQ4. So that Wi-Fi, mobile apps and just Wi-Fi connection from your computer to the device, we need to streamline those more. We need to build up those communication paths so they're much more robust. That needs to be the just completely stock standard plug and play communication method for the IQ4s.
Yeah. And one thing that you kind of touched on, but maybe worth going over, is all of those options. So USB-C, Ethernet, and wireless, they can all work in unison. Well, and actually then the card slots as well. So the XQD, CF Express slots, they can all work together rather than separate.
There's an XQD/CF Express, the same file for physical format, and the IQ4 supports them both. And then SD as like a stepchild to those two. Then USB-C, Ethernet, and Wi-Fi. All 5 of those, we'll call it, can really work together fairly seamlessly. You capture to the CF Express, let's say, from the camera system. So no matter what cable is connected, no matter how I'm tethered, I just capture to the CF Express. It's fast, it's secure, dumps it on there. Once it's on the CF Express, then it can migrate over USB-C or Ethernet. So one of those 2 connected paths. Let's say while it's transferring one of those files over USB-C, my assistant, Raul, who's in the studio with me, he walks around carelessly and kicks out the cable. How dare you, Raul? If that happens, then the camera, the Wi-Fi can just be on in the background. So once that happens, my studio tech can just say, not a problem, grab onto the IQ4's Wi-Fi signal, and that file that got lost, it's still on the CF Express. It knows it hasn't transferred to host. It'll just say, oh, I'll just throw that over Wi-Fi, and then it'll just connect. It'll take longer, but that'll give you time to grab the cable and plug it back in.
It's a good backup.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then Ethernet, if I have a photographer that needs to shoot tethered and needs to, I can never touch his camera to change his battery, and they just need to walk around the studio, Ethernet, perfect. When you plug that in, it's not a connection that can be ripped out. It clicks in, and then walk around the studio, and you can even connect it to the wall, and somebody in Hong Kong can connect a patch through to your connection and be pulling files off of that camera's CF Express card as well. So the complexity of that tethering is substantial, but it can be as simple or as easy as anybody wants it to be.
Yeah, but even in a more basic setup with the Ethernet, what kind of infrastructure does someone need in place? Is it as simple as plugging through an Ethernet adapter into USB-C and you're good to go?
It could be.
Or do you need?
Yeah. It could definitely, on a Mac, you have that little white dongle. Everything's a dongle with this computer. So it could be an Ethernet cable from the IQ4 to that dongle, and then it'll connect to my computer. It could be the Ethernet cable. If I have a studio with Ethernet infrastructure, I could plug it into the wall and then plug my computer into the wall or into the Wi-Fi. If it's the same network, I can pick it up and connect.
Yeah. But if you want power, that's when you need to bring in things like a switch of some sort to provide that power.
And in most infrastructure, there's already a switch somewhere in the wall to just carry signal. So as long as you're 15 meters to the closest hub, you'll be fine and get power in.
Yeah. But as you said, the cool thing about Ethernet and maybe where it was a little surprise is it's kind of with new releases, you expect new technology, and it was kind of cool with the IQ4 to be like, well, actually, we're just going to harness something which is, readily available anywhere, relatively inexpensively, and make use of that.
And it made sense that if we were going to have something that's that dead simple and that robust, then let's make sure that let's
work with it.
The most basic connection.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I think that lays some nice foundations of the system. I think we should see what we've got flagged as questions in the chat section and see what we can answer for our good audience out there. So let's take the first from Danielle, which we can pop up onto the screen here. So a few feature update questions for Drew. Focus stacking control from Capture One, from someone who's using their XF maybe on a studio stand in an overhead position where it's out of reach. This is a request I've put through before. Could we get more? I know the answer will be yes, of course we can, but what might we be able to see possible in terms of improvement of the focus stacking tool access from Capture One? Sure. So could we make it more remote?
Anything's possible. That's the headline, and then the caveat is it really depends on where Capture One is in its development path and where we are in our development path. So with feature update number 8, we did put into the XF as well as the IQ4 the ability to trigger from an external remote, like trigger the capture tool that's in the IQ4. So if I'm in frame averaging on the IQ4 and I have a external shutter release cable, now all I have to do is be in that tool, then I can sit back and relax and wait for the right moment and then trigger it from an external. That's kind of step one on this path of getting external devices, and we'll call Capture One an external device, to trigger the different capture tools, capture modes of the XF and the IQ4. So I think that, since we introduced focus stacking, that need has been there. It's certainly a much more complicated implementation that any of us would have guessed or any of us want. But we've taken kind of the first step to laying the foundation so that we can have those external devices trigger these things. So now, we need an update from Capture One, and then we'll need another update from our end, and then we'll meet in the middle. So I mean, I'm not going to give you a timeline, but
no, I get that. I mean, in my experience with photographers, it's the ability to save the positions in Capture One would be great, because you can do everything else from Capture One. We can set the autofocus. All we need to do is open the tool on the XF. But the ability to save those positions would make the process much smoother.
Right, like a hyperfocal type of
kind of, well, like in the way with the XF, because if we've got it on a studio stand out of reach, we need to open the tool. We need to set our focus point, which we can do through Capture One with the live view. But then we need to go back to the camera to physically save that position. It would be great to be able to physically save the position in Capture One. But anyway, Danielle, I hope that was a good addressing of your question. So next up, someone calling it a very dense and useful webinar. I think that's I think that's a bittersweet compliment there. Next up, we've got. This is an interesting one from Michelle. Why is 1/25th of a second the maximum shutter speed for the electronic shutter on the IQ4? Good one.
It's not. Next question.
Okay.
So the electronic shutter is it's a rolling shutter. So it's the CMOS sensor that's just panning down line by line and exposing. So that doesn't happen instantly. That would be a global shutter. So where all lines of the pixels just kind of expose at once and then turn off, that's a global shutter. We don't have that. We have a rolling shutter. So the electronic shutter is a rolling shutter, and a rolling shutter, like the name suggests, constantly rolls, right? It's constantly going up and down. That's a video camera where it's just from one pixel at the top to the bottom pixel, one at a time, cascading and rolling down. So that being the case, fluorescent lights and other things also flicker. And if you are using the electronic shutter under conditions where there is a flicker from lights, 60 hertz or 50 hertz, depending on where in the world you are, your image will kind of capture that flicker, and it will capture that density change because it's rolling. Sorry, this got way more technical than I wanted it to. So because that happens, we have a feature in the IQ4 that's called the frequency suppression or flicker. That's it. So you can turn this on or off. So if you turn it on and you say, I want to turn it on, I'm in Europe, so that's 60 hertz. I make those two setting adjustments to turn it on in my IQ4. It will not give you shutter speeds that will pick up that flicker, that adjustment. So you're limited in what shutter speeds you can use, because if you use them outside of that, it will see that flicker. So turn off that feature. You have access to all of them, and just understand that if you're under conditions like fluorescent lights, then you might have some problems. But if you're outside in the sunshine, wherever that sun might be, you'll never see it.
Yeah. I hope that was some dense and useful information for you there, Michelle. I mean, from my point of view, and I've asked this to you before as well, but will we kind of see the flash sync speed with electronic shutter improved as well, so that could be a workable tool for portrait photography?
It depends on the sensor, because in order for us to improve the flash sync speed, we need to improve that rolling speed. So the IQ3 and the 100 megapixel in the IQ4, those have a very slow rolling shutter. So we have a very long flash sync. So you can only use like a third of a second to sync your flash. But with the IQ4, we get a little bit faster. So now you can use like a quarter of a second. not much, but a little bit. So it really depends on that sensor. Now we can really tighten the screws on the sensor and turn it up and make it work faster, but then we're going to sacrifice some image quality because we're putting in more power. It's going to get hotter, and there's going to be other trade-offs. Dynamic range will get reduced because we're ripping through it so quickly. So we can improve those things, but it's going to come at a cost to one of our top 3 priorities.
Yeah. So it's balancing the image quality versus the feature set. No,
so
I get that.
In the future, when a global shutter is available, that's a full 645 sensor, then I imagine if there's any manufacturer out there in the world that makes sensors of, the 3 that people are aware of, if any of them have a full frame 645 medium format global shutter sensor, I would guess that there would be an opportunity for Phase One to adopt that and put that into our system. These are just guesses. I have no idea.
Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Question from Paul, which is a good one as well. So we didn't touch on it, but one of the features that you introduced in the IQ4 is the ability to preview while in live view a RAW and an RGB exposure. And Paul is asking, how should you interpret the RAW histogram to get the best exposure? And I think this is quite a good question because it seems like there's an awful lot of latitude when you're seeing that RAW histogram where it's very hard to push it all the way to the right.
The RGB histogram is the conversion of all of your raw data into an RGB, right? Into a linear file. Just think of it as a JPEG. So if you're shooting a camera that only shoots JPEG, you're only focused on what the RGB histogram would show you. And that's why most cameras out there in the world do not show you the raw data because most people don't really care. The JPEG is all that's in their mind. The final output is all that's in their mind. So once you start shooting raw and you're really focused on shooting raw, the image quality potential that exists in that file, because it's not fixed in any way, it's completely open to interpretation. That file can be interpreted by different engines like Capture One or Lightroom or all these other raw conversion softwares. Those are different engines that are going to interpret your raw file differently. So what we do is we show you the potential of your raw data in that raw histogram. This is what actually exists in the raw file. There's no getting around it. There's no stretching this and moving that. If this data is in the file in the raw, you'll be able to get it in any of the engines that you use, and you'll be able to stretch and move and play with it. But if it falls outside of this histogram, it's never coming back. There's no recovery tool on the planet that could ever give you the highlights if they're blown out, or the shadow detail if it's crammed all the way onto the left. So that raw histogram should really tell you that if I stay within this 0 to 255 value, and I capture all my data here, I can almost ignore what the RGB histogram is telling me. I just look at this and say, okay, well, it might look blown out, but my raw histogram is telling me that the data is still there. So now I need to go find a raw processing tool that will pull that data back. So if you use Capture One, you're not going to have any problems, obviously. But that's what that raw histogram is trying to tell you. This is the true nature of the data that you're collecting. And if you overexpose the raw histogram, there isn't a magic wand that will ever bring it back. No one can invent another tool in the future that could ever pull that highlight.
Bring that back.
So that's the way you need to look at that raw histogram. And that raw histogram, in a lot of cases, it's going to look underexposed, and the data is going to be really condensed. And that's okay, because all the amazing software tools that are out there can always take the file and pull it apart and expand your midtones and push up your shadows and pull back your highlights. So as long as that raw data, you're good.
Nice. So it's it really is showing you kind of as far as you can push to the right as possible. And I think that takes us to the next question quite nicely from Anwar about ETTR, which was one of the lab features you brought in end of last year with feature update 8. So I'll just finish answering that question and answer this one. So will ETTR be made to work with the XF is Anwar's question.
I think we can preface this by saying ETTR, which stands for Exposed to the Right, is a tool we introduced in feature update 8. It's a tool that lives in the IQ4 Infinity platform, and it is a tool that is in this ecosystem we call the lab. That ecosystem means these are unpolished, unfinished features and tools. They're 80% of the way done. There's a lot of fine tuning and polish that needs to be done to these, but we put them out into the world to get feedback like this from whoever asked this question.
Anwar.
So we put these tools out there so we can get this feedback and see where the demand is, to where we need to refine it, where we need to push it before we put it into the actual operating system, into the Infinity platform. So right now it exists in this beta realm where you can play with it. It'll work in some instances. It'll work on the XT. It'll work with the IQ4 on another camera. It'll kind of work on the XF, but on the XF, it's still competing with the XF's internal auto exposure sensor
meter. Yeah,
so we'll
okay.
get there for sure. And when we put that feature into the camera system as a complete, polished, beautiful feature, no problem. It'll work there.
Yeah. And I suppose just to tie that back to the question before, ETTR or exposed to the right, is that pushing the raw histogram as far to the right as possible?
It balances it a little bit.
The RGB?
It's meant to evaluate the scene on an RGB level and push it as far as it can, and then kind of just give it a little bit more of a kick. So it's it doesn't only look at the raw, because then it would always look blown out and always look overexposed. So we do kind of dial it back a little bit, but it depends on the feedback we get. We can always change that algorithm, change that process.
Okay, cool. And I'm going to give Anwar 2 for the price of 1 here, because he's got a question about autofocus, which is, can the IQ4 be made to drive the focus motor using the focus peaking feature? Right. So essentially, will we have any autofocus control through the IQ4, I think is Anwar's question.
It's a good question and a very observant question. What you're asking for is called contrast-based autofocus. It is a software-driven autofocus as opposed to a optical comparison autofocus, which is the phase focus that's in our cameras now. So contrast-based autofocus is going to look at one pixel next to the other pixel and just kind of keep pushing and pulling autofocus until those pixels get contrast. They get the lines between them are no longer blurred, and that's what we call in focus. That's almost every single camera system today. The mirrorless camera systems, obviously, they don't have a prism to do their autofocus. They're contrast-based autofocus. Some of them have dedicated software drivers, processors that only do the autofocus. So the new Canons, the new Sonys, they only do, and even the new Fuji, they only do autofocus in one of their processors. So we have to, should we go down that road, we have to use the same processor we use to create image quality, and image quality to take some of its time to do autofocus. Is it possible in the IQ4? Absolutely. Almost anything is possible aside from making coffee. But will we go down that road? Well, I'm not going to say whether we will or whether we won't, but it's there's some trade-offs, power consumption being one, speed being another. But all the data is there, and the software to drive it just needs to be written. So maybe.
Yeah, cool. Well, there's a vote from me on that one as well, Anwar. I think that would be a really good feature. Got a question from Matt, which is a good one. Going back to the, I suppose the power and storage side of things with the USB-C. Is there something with the design of the IQ4 that prevents power sharing from working as it did with the IQ3? Or is it just a case of a firmware fix at a later date? Although the XF allows you to change battery in the IQ4, it does not seem to actually share power and disperse across the two batteries. Basically USB-C powering and also power share between the XF and the IQ4. If you want to elaborate on that, Mr. Drew.
No, it's a very good question. Feature update 8, we just did one power improvement on the IQ4, where now you can power the entire IQ4 from an external battery. So via USB-C, you can plug in a power bank that everybody has these days. You can plug that in, and it will actually power the IQ4 as well as charge the battery. So if I'm using the IQ4, it's just pulling power from this external battery and leaving the internal battery alone. If I'm not doing anything with the IQ4, I set it down, I step away, it'll start picking up and charging the battery in the IQ4. So we just made that improvement in feature update 8 from where it was before, where it would only charge it under certain conditions. So we are constantly improving the power management of the system because, of course, power is it's a big deal. The XF and the IQ3 shared a very common power language, right? They were very The IQ3 wasn't as demanding on power as the IQ4. The way that it needs to consume power was very, very similar to the way that the XF consumes power. So basically, when the voltage and the wattage, I'm using these terms like I really understand them, like I'm an electronic engineer. I'm not. When those align, we can make one system, or we can make two systems that just act as one, right? We can just kind of open up the lines and let the power flow between them. We can't do it as simply with the IQ4, but anything is possible. So what we have done is we've set it up so that when the IQ4 enters a certain state, when the battery door is open, it gives it the signal to enter this state. Then it starts to pull power from the XF, and it says, okay, I need a little bit of power while I change the battery here. And then likewise, the XF will do that with the IQ4. So they both enter this necessary state where they're at the same level, sharing power temporarily. To have them do it all the time, it's not a bug. It's just it's a complication, and everything can be fixed. Everything can be done. Is that what we want to be spending our time on? These things take different priorities. So the way we have it set up now is what we think is the best compromise, so that we don't enter into that power share state all the time and cause the other problems that it introduces. Heat being one of them, and where there's heat, then there's loss of image quality. So, you know, there's trade-offs in all of this stuff. If it's absolutely necessary for all of our customers, and who was it that asked that question?
That was a question from Matt.
Matt, if it's absolutely necessary for you and you can't live without it, then you know, reach out to us and tell us why. And if we can figure out that there's a whole lot of other customers like you that are suffering that aren't on these webinars and aren't telling us directly, then we'll chalk it up the priority list for sure.
Yeah. Question from Dominic: will this webinar be available for replay later? I should have said at the beginning, yeah, it will. If you keep an eye on the blog at teamworkphoto.com, it should be up there, if not this afternoon, by tomorrow, and you can watch it again if you need to go and get on with your day, Dominic. We've got a question from Ottar, which is, pop it up on the screen. Any development on the AFR? It still needs some more refining. Now, maybe you want to put some more meat on that question, Ottar, because I've always found AFR to be quite a powerful tool and really useful. But I suppose to answer it in some way from you, Drew, you know, are there any plans to further refine that tool or any existing
We are
tools?
open to refining and improving any tool that our customers ask for, as long as we can see what's possible. I will say that there's quite a few people. This camera system has been around since 2015. There's quite a few people that when we introduced AFR, because it wasn't in the camera system when we first launched it, it was available many years later when we did one of our feature update improvements. There's some people that you know, their first response to it was, well, that's great, but it doesn't work. After they contacted their sales team, the wonderful people at Teamwork or any of our other global affiliates, and then they spoke with support. Our support department was able to figure out that, okay, well, their autofocus sensor is actually just filthy. You know, there's so much dirt in there that it doesn't work, or there's a hair that's in the way, or, you know, any of these other circumstances where our support department was able to take the system in, get it checked out, and then from then on, things are great. So, you know, I can't speak for that specific statement of what needs refining if I don't know what it is, but of course, we're here to fix and refine and improve anything that's warranted. The first thing I could tell you, I've never had any trouble with AFR once it was released in the beta stages, sure. But the only thing I can tell you is reach out to our support department, get a bit of a diagnosis, and maybe there's something we can do for your system. Maybe it's a cleaning or a refresh or a recalibration of the whole thing. Who knows? So reach out to them. They're the experts. They'll be able to help you.
Yeah. And I suppose some context, because this stuff becomes very second nature after a while. For those of you who aren't familiar with AFR, it was a feature update in version 5, I think, where essentially, if you're, particularly when you're working at wider apertures and you're focusing and recomposing, the plane of focus will actually shift back to, you know, the point that you want to lock on focus. So I mean, I've always found it to be an incredibly good tool. So yeah, Ottar, maybe it's worth.
AFR.
Yeah. So Ottar, it might be worth, as Drew says, either contacting your local support or Phase One themselves and seeing what might be awry with that. Got another question from Anwar in here as well. So can we have the frame averaging and dual exposure available as a shutter mode so that we can use a remote release or the body shutter button to activate it?
And I think that's, that's what we took the first steps with in feature update 8. So now you need to select it on the digital back, but then you can trigger it from the external release. And of course, the logical next step is to put this into a more remote accessible menu. I think I said what I needed to say without saying anything specific.
Yeah, let's wait for version update 8.1, eh?
Maybe.
Yeah. That is all the questions that I can see flagged in here. So I would say if anyone has got anything else that they want to have answered by Drew, then now's your time. I'll just pop back and double check there aren't any that I've missed. No, that's all good. So that covers everything. I mean, thanks for taking the time to go through the XF IQ4.
Of course. Happy to do it.
It's been it's always good to hear your insight into the system.
Well, I'm always happy to give it.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, we will have to arrange something again in the future. But yeah, it's been great of you to take the time. Really appreciate it.
Here, and for everybody listening, if there's any requests, suggestions, questions, reach out, of course, to the wonderful people at Teamwork. But you can get in touch with our support department as well. They're just down the hall here, so I'm not a stranger to them, and our lines of communication are wide open. So reach out. We're happy to talk to you. Happy to understand more what your needs are and how we can improve these camera systems.
Yeah, great stuff. Thanks, Drew. Wonderful. Really appreciate it. That's cool. Let's hope we can see each other proper soon.
Yeah, beer's on me.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, take care, Drew.
See ya.
See you, man. Okay, so my earphone's slipping out. Thanks for joining, everybody. It's been as someone pointed out, a dense and useful webinar. I think that's a nice way to put it. Hopefully it's elaborated on some features in the XF and IQ4 system that have been useful and informative. If you do have any other questions, we are always here at Teamwork. Put our contact details up to answer them. And we're a full service phase 1 supplier. So in terms of rental, sales, support, testing, advice, anything like that, we're here to help. So you can find us online at teamworkphoto.com. You can contact us on the info email address there, and also if you're social media savvy and want to stay up to date with what we're up to, you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, etc. If your ears have been pricked by anything in this webinar, if you're using an older phase 1 system, or you're thinking of stepping into a phase 1 medium format system, we do have a couple of promotions running at the moment. So we've got a few options. If you're a Hasselblad user, there is a current offer running on Hasselblad Upgrades. So if you've got a H3D, H4D, H5D system, and you're interested by some of the features that the IQ4 or the XF has, and you've been thinking about it, you've been needing a little bit more incentive, then there is a current promotion running offering a fairly substantial discount on an IQ4 upgrade. Likewise, if you're already a phase 1 digital back owner, there is a trade-in offer running on P series and IQ1, 2, and 3 backs. Aside from the usual upgrade path which exists, there is additional discount running. So if you are interested in having a further conversation, then do get in touch with us. And if you're completely new to medium format but have been thinking about it, there is a offer running to have a system here somewhere. Upgrade a DSLR system, a professional DSLR system. So if you're, working with 35mm, but thinking there could be more out there, and you've been thinking about it for some time, it could be a good opportunity. Again, contact us, find out what we can do on trading in a DSLR system. There are offers available, and we're happy to talk you through the process. So I think that's all from me. It's been great for so many people to attend. As I say, it's been a dense and useful conversation. But if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with us at Teamwork, and we're happy to run you through anything regarding the phase 1 system. So I will leave you to get on with your day. Thank you very much for joining.